Hello everyone. I want to thank the authorities and the Endeavor Foundation for having invited me to talk. Here I go with you. A few days ago, the deregulation minister said a phrase that describes one of the fundamental characteristics of Argentina that we are building. For each need there will be a market. What seems one more phrase, in reality it is a great engine and, in fact, is the countercara of that sinister, impoverishing phrase, in the murderous limit of the socialists and their most macabre tool, that is the social justice. That indicates that where there is a need, a right is born. Because there is a problem, because that right to someone has to pay. And the problem is that the needs are endless and the rights are finite because the resources are finite. If we would not be in paradise, it is like Ronald Reagan's phrase, socialism works in two places, in paradise because it is not necessary and in hell because they live it daily. I got up friendly today. That question is neither general well-being, however, that do not like collectivists. They prefer, as a consequence of their ignorance and their inability to see the abstraction and wonder that the market is, in that sense they want to submit to the claw of the state and that macabre instrument that is social justice, which as Professor Huerta de Soto would say is deeply unfair and violent, because it implies an unequal treatment in front of the law and is also preceded by a robbery. Therefore not in vain Argentina he had sinister consequences, because being the richest country in the world, when we came to power we were halfway down with more than 50% of poor and on the edge of a hyperinflation that was going to lead to poverty levels at levels of 90% or more. Therefore, that has done enough damage to Argentines. But fortunately, at some point the Argentines decided to change. We began to embrace the ideas of freedom and we are coming out of hell. In that sense today I am very comfortable among you, because it is precisely a fundamental piece of the market. It is you and not the parasitic state, Roscaro, of the alleged policy that will solve the problems of the people. Let's say politicians are actually sinister beings in general, because what they do is break your legs. Then they give you the crutches getting it out of another pocket and they also intend to thank them. And that above calls him high politics. Well, sinister is that. Politicians in their arrogance, voracity of power and control, wanted to be them through the state and using the resources that the Argentines took away, those responsible for finishing the problems of society. Now it will be free people who offer others the answers to their needs in exchange for a consideration. That is the market, a social cooperation mechanism where we are all in some way or another the benefactor of the neighbor, either because we sell it or because we buy something. We came to shrink the state to make a society. This implies lowering the expense and then lowering taxes, and we do not stop any day and we will not stop until the last day we are in power, until eliminating all the regulations we can. Moreover, it is wonderful in the Federico Sturzenegger's Ministry of Deregulation. He has a kind of accountant of how many days we have delegated powers to continue deregulating rapidly until politicians put the boot on our heads again. Meanwhile, we have made the largest structural reform in Argentine history, because it is 8 times larger than what Menem did, and we did it with 15% in the Chamber of Deputies, 10% of the Senate, and have jumped 90 placed on economic freedom. And if people continue to accompany us, I tell you what I am going to do from Argentina to the world's freer country. They have no doubts. Every day we find and eliminate a new expense. or rather a bad expense that made the state of money that takes the Argentines. Every day we find and eliminate some Soviet regulation designed to hinder progress and favor caste. More than the second thing, imagine how harmful they are. They are all kiosks. It is all as a kind of mega kiosk. This consists in part of our management to identify an unnecessary expense, a useless regulation, and eliminate it. We did not come to give them anything. I do not bring you subsidies or fiduciary funds spurious to distribute discretionally. It happens that now the Soviet says that I am cruel because, let's say, we eliminate a background that was supposedly to create homes, and in the background it was to curb people's twine, but hey, we are not going to give in, or stop in this to finish the caresse to politics. Well, that's why we are doing. No, they hit us all the time. They invent all kinds of things, and obviously they have accomplices. The reshaped microphones, the mama powder, the living of the guideline, which, as I said today, the most sensitive organ of the human being is the pocket, and how I cut their pattern. Much of the journalism is quite violent. Moreover, they never saw what they have for them to give good news. That is, everything they suffer, every good news has a bad time. So Mandralandia members today must have a horrible day. Good because it is good for Argentines. Our goal is to give it the best tool that we can offer, freedom respecting property right. Argentines are walking every day a freer country. We are walking with a firmness and without intention to stop. That has no doubt. I never break. In doubt, I accelerate more. In record time we are freeing ourselves from one of the heaviest chains that a society can suffer, which is inflation. What seemed impossible, we did it in less than a year. I want to point out this. I want to make an interesting note. Today the inflation data, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index came out. The number was 2.7%, and one of the interesting things that by design the program has an induced inflation, which is given by the devaluation rate plus international inflation. Therefore, when we net the inflation number of induced inflation, inflation of the month was 0.2%. In other words, today consumer inflation is traveling at a rate of 2.4%. What is that is good? And in addition you can see it for example in what is the inflation of goods that was 2.1%. That is, it is basically driven by services. So it is very interesting to see what this program has again. I understand the vast majority of the econochants say that they had a great time predicting that everything was going to go wrong. I understand that it hurts them. I understand that there was someone who said that, for example, if we were doing everything, the inflation floor was going to be 400%. There were others who said that the 8 could not be perforated. Then they said that the 6 could not be drilled. Then the 4. Well, we are going for 2.7. But there is something very interesting. One of the things that this program has as a characteristic, I said that inflation is always in every place, is a monetary phenomenon, generated by an excessive supply of money, either or because it raised the supply, because the demand fell, or the two things happened at the same time, and that makes the money, loses the money. That is, all prices expressed in monetary units rise. And in that context, we also point out that monetary policy has a lag from 18 months to 24 months. In other words, we expected to be able to lower inflation in the span of a year and a half. 2. And first, as you will see, if we clean the effect of induced inflation, let's say we are already at inflation levels of what the reasonable world has. I warn you that, if for 2 more months we repeat numbers in this line, we will be lowering the crawling peg to 1, and when we repeat 3 months of 1, we will be releasing the exchange market and free ourselves from the stocks and get out of all this adventures. So things are starting to see each other. But the most interesting thing is that we did this with some elements that have not been in other stabilization programs. For example, there was no hyperinflation before. That is, we managed to avoid it. Because what hyperinflation does is destroy real balances. Then after stabilization is very easy, because when the economy has to monetize, let's say, that favors the inflation rate to fall very fast. Another thing that we did not do, despite the fact that the economic ones augured it, because since they did not know how to solve it, they believed that we were going to solve it wildly as they believed. We did it without violating property right. We did not do a Bonex plan, for example. Actually, this huge work that has done the best Minister of Economy in the world, Toto Caputo, whom I congratulate, did so on 2 pillars. An adjustment in the treasure balance of 5 points of the GDP, and nobody talked about the problem of the paid liabilities that left us one day, and that could have duplicated the monetary base just in one day, and nobody knew how to fix it. And in a work, let's say that it will truly be in textbooks, in fact, and the Argentine case is studied as the Argentine miracle in many very prestigious universities. What nobody knew how to fix, between Toto Caputo, Pablo Corno, and the president of the central bank Santiago Basili, they achieved in 6 months disarm the bomb of the paid liabilities and eliminated a fiscal point of 10 points of the GDP, with which in consolidated terms we made the greatest fiscal adjustment in the history of humanity. And to all those who predicted that as a consequence of this we were going to put the economy into a mega recession, which was going to be transformed into a Great Depression, I also tell you that in August the monthly indicator of economic activity, EMAE, a proxy of GDP in destationalized terms, reached the same level we had in December. Therefore, Zerditos and Keynesians, game over. Not only that, we also did that without fixing the exchange rate, because setting the exchange rate would have been easier. If I clean them 2.5 inflation, as you will see, we have already been traveling to the annual 2.4. But not only that, many of the onset stabilization programs made a relative pricing. If you set the prices that go up the most today are the regulated ones, and we are still doing it. And although we said that we were going to be achieving from 18 to 24 months, we are achieving it in less than a year. Go if this does not resemble an economic miracle. But it's not all, because there are many who now appear that they care about poverty. Of course, I believe that the concern it generates is that we are not making poverty grow. So, of course, they are running out of customers. Let's say, the kings of the high policy need poverty to live from them, and for example today the basic basket grew 1.4%, well below the salary. It is very important, for example, that the informal sector is growing. Therefore, there are the estimates of Martín González Rosado de la Ditella, and shows that today poverty, after we sincere it at the beginning of management and that touched 57%, today poverty is already below 50%. That is, we have lowered more than 8 points poverty. It is also a huge job, and that neither does the caste like it. This titanic task that is achieving the whole of Argentines is only the first step on the road to the free country that we want to be. Inflation not only affects the poorest and devours wages, It is also an anchor for those who have the courage to undertake. Our goal is for you to worry about how to produce more efficiently and at a lower cost, to have greater sales instead of being aware of how much things will be worth the next month. That is, recover the economic calculation. That is, when you generate inflation, what you are doing is distorting the functioning of the system and therefore is wrong. And the more noise it has, worse a signs. Let's say, you are all very intelligent, very interesting and obviously people that everyone understands what I am saying, that is, and I am also good to disseminate. Let's say, inside the talents that touched me, there are others who did not know them, but I found them on the road. That is a joke, I clarify. This of making jokes about myself is a topic. It always gives rise to many interpretations. But the point is as follows. Imagine that there is now noise and the more noise, the more noise. Then, there comes a time that for rather I explain, you will not understand me. But it is not a problem that you do not understand, you have no capacity to understand. It is not a problem that I explain badly, but the problem is that there is noise. That is inflation, that is what causes the price system inflation and therefore you walk blind, and therefore the resources are wrong. That is why it is so important to exterminate inflation. Apart from that, it is an extremely distorting and highly regressive tax that punishes more strongly to those who have less. That is why it surprises me so much that the more a politician, the more he wants to give the little machine. It is something that I really do not understand. It is something that I still could not solve it. But what happens that we also know that I say the socialists are hypocritical. They are people who, at one time I believed that socialism was a kind of mental illness, that they had something that looks like a room, but that leaves people, and that did not allow them to think correctly. Then good what I know. But then I discovered that it was not, that it was much more serious, that it was a disease of the soul, that has to do with the values involved in socialism, which is to embrace envy, hatred, resentment, unequal treatment before the law, because they hide in that altruistic patina the intention of stealing someone. And you know how the saying is, the one who distributes stays with the best part. See how all politicians are the more totalitarian the socialist system. They are all millionaires, miserable people. So, in that sense, the most important thing for me is that you can feel free, that you can undertake and that the state is not stealing with any types of taxes, with present taxes or with future taxes, that is the indebtedness against the fiscal deficit, and with inflation tax, which is a tax not legislated. That is, one of the things we come to do is end the chest of politics and in different ways. Whether with the taxes present because they punish the present activity, with future taxes because they are also deeply cruel, because they hit future generations, or the inflation tax that hits those who have less. And the truth is that the price distortions that were generated by the obsessive interference of the state, which was the country's rule for so many years, attempted against the heroes that were encouraged to carry out an entrepreneurship. We came to defend all Argentines who produce, say, and take them out of the claws of the caste. We are not going to make false distinctions between large companies and small entrepreneurs. That is also an aberration, because if you, I say, let's say, are concerned about small business, that is, then I say, they will never grow. What is the incentive? It is an incentive to be small. That is not a horizon for an entrepreneur. The businessman could keep the entire planet, and that is what he has to do. Because what is interesting, you can only be successful serving others with better quality or best price goods. That is, the better you are going to be heroes. They will be becoming social benefactors. Not good, the state loves them small then. I say, What is that? That is truly one of our terrors that politicians also have in Argentina. Moreover, all Argentines who generate wealth were persecuted for years, young and guys. That ended. Because we understand that in addition to the legitimate economic benefits that you can obtain for the activities you develop also generate a huge impact on society. Governing this Argentina is challenging. Every day we have to face obstacles that the caste puts us. Today did they go wrong, right? They are desperate because little by little they begin to see that this is working and that is why they despair. It's amazing. Would you think of that in the middle of a football match? The referee says, well, how this team is dancing it to the other. From now on we change the game rule. Because that's what Congress wanted to do. It happens that they now have a republicanism attack. Let's say with the rule they always played, no, now you have to change them. Because he is going well, then they are desperate. That is, the caste is desperate. Moreover, they are understanding that the improvement of the economy is at the expense of them. Each privilege that we take away translates into an improvement for society. Despite the fact that their attacks are increasingly frontal and violent, their movements are increasingly clumsy and their most scarce credibility. This is very interesting because one of the things that is being discussed in the world about why we made an adjustment of the magnitude we did and was not hyper-recessive. Well, I tell you that we do not invent anything, it is in economic theory. What happens that of course, let's say, as they are sick of Keynesianism they do not understand, I say, that there is another way of making the good economy, which is understanding of general balance, not putting an equation system and believing that this is general balance. Then, I ask you a question, if you have the body and a parasite, what are you going to kill, the body or the parasite? I say, and if you kill the parasite or better, they are not worse. Well, what we are doing. That's why the lady, they saw the other day, she was desperate, she told me everything. Of course, I am breaking the state that is where they enrich themselves. That's why they are so nervous, the caste is afraid. Moreover, Argentines already see the threads in each maneuver. Society has already realized what its true interests are. Do not worry if we show something in these 11 months that we are not going to give in to them. We have a clear course and a committed society, which gives us the strength we need. I say, I could say so, it sounds very nice. The issue is when tax degenerates want to turn the fiscal balance. Here we are, the fiscal balance continues. They can continue trying to destabilize us from Congress or with their journalists in Sobile, but the reality is that we are a little better every day. I will not explain to you what it is to face obstacles. Those who have the audacity to undertake know that it is about solving problems every day. The key is to face them and insist until you get results. The world is in the midst of the largest technological revolution in the history of mankind. We want Argentina to be the protagonist in this process, and we want entrepreneurs who risk and innovate leading this revolution. Our contribution will be to protect them from the parasites that will always seek to hang from their successes. The best sample of this and my commitment to technological progress is the president of my advisory advice, that brilliant economist and best human being who is Dr. Damien Rydell. And we are doing everything for Argentina to become an artificial intelligence hub. And the most interesting thing about this is that artificial intelligence is as if it were the industrial but recharged, repowering revolution. And the most interesting thing is that when you look at the convergence processes, for the place where Argentina is, Argentina could become and be at the level of the first world power in a period of 35 or 40 years. The interesting thing is that what Damien is doing and what he is promoting on his agenda can accelerate the times much more and generate a huge well-being gain. So that man who is there is doing a lot for the well-being of all Argentines. And, obviously, I will be to take care of you the benefits. Do not forget that I am the mole within the state. The other day I was gathered with an economist and says, Milei makes the adjustment and, in addition, he likes to do it, he enjoys it, believe me that I enjoy shrinking the state. That is, it is something that generates a huge pleasure. But above all things I want to value what you represent, right? That it is impressive that despite everything they did to complicate their lives they have managed to be successful. That demonstrates the potential we have of what Argentines are capable. That is, you exist despite the preventive machine. That is wonderful. You have put all the... You run with Usain Bolt, but with a 50 kilos backpack. I came to get that backpack. They will beat Usain Bolt. I trust you, you will do it. To you and all the Argentines of good, who strive every day to be better, I want to give you the same message as those who seek to prevent Argentina from getting ahead. We are just beginning. Nothing and no one is going to stop us. We are going to make Argentina the freer country in the world and, in a few decades, we will remember this period like that in which Argentina laid the foundations to become a world power. May God bless you. The forces of heaven accompany us and long live freedom. Damn it.